What comes to mind when you think of Genghis Khan? Horsemen galloping across the steppes, cities in flames, blood flowing through streets. And yes, the Mongols were ruthless conquerors. But here's the truth history didn't tell you. Genghis Khan built his empire not with war, but with trade. History books hide this. Because the real story contains a far more dangerous lesson. Armies take land, but only money keeps it. And if you want to understand how power really works, the lesson the Mongol Empire taught 8 centuries ago still cuts like a sharp blade today. The Silk Road was a vast network stretching thousands of kilometers from China to Europe, carrying silk, spices, jewels, and ideas. Before Genghis Khan, these routes were fragmented, dangerous, and suffocated by heavy taxes from small states. Bandits lurked in the deserts, customs eroded merchants' profits, wars constantly disrupted trade. Everything changed when the Mongols emerged from the steppes at the beginning of the 13th century. Genghis Khan didn't just conquer cities, he connected them. By uniting territories stretching from China to Persia under a single political order, he created a secure trade highway, covering most of the known world. But this wasn't luck. This was design. Genghis Khan had solved the psychology of merchants. He knew they hated uncertainty even more than taxes. So he offered something radical: protection. Caravans traveling under the Mongol flag were protected by soldiers, guaranteed safe passage, and exempted from arbitrary customs. In return, merchants paid tribute and taxes directly to the empire. The Mongols enforced this ruthlessly. Bandits threatening trade were hunted down and destroyed. Local officials trying to skim profits were executed. For the first time in history, a continental trade network became not just open, but safe. The result was explosive. Chinese silk, paper, and porcelain went west. Persian glassware, carpets, and silver went east. Spices from India and Southeast Asia reached Europe. The Mongol Empire transformed the Silk Road into the world's first truly global marketplace. Here's where the real genius emerges. Genghis Khan wasn't just a destroyer. He was an economic strategist. War enriched him once, but trade enriched him forever. He created what historians call the Pax Mongolica, a century-long period of relative peace across Eurasia that made long-distance trade possible. A Venetian merchant could travel all the way to China under Mongol protection, something previously unimaginable. Marco Polo's legendary journey only happened because the Mongols made the route safe. A brutal paradox. The Middle Ages' bloodiest warriors created the era's safest roads. One of the most striking things Genghis Khan's successors did was create a network of relay stations called yams, spread across tens of thousands of miles. Every 30 to 40 kilometers, fresh horses, food, and shelter were ready for couriers and merchants. The Mongol courier system was so efficient that messages could cover hundreds of miles in a single day. Imagine this in the 13th century. The fastest communication network the world had ever seen. But these stations weren't just about speed. They were about control. Merchants and travelers registered at each stop, giving the empire the ability to track movement, ensure security, and tax efficiently. Not software, but a supply chain management system backed by Mongol steel. The Mongols also reimagined money. In China, under Kublai Khan's rule, they expanded the use of paper money. Initially, it was revolutionary. Paper was lighter, easier to transport, and allowed trade to grow dramatically. For a while, it worked magnificently. But paper money has a fatal temptation: overprinting. When Kublai Khan and his successors issued more paper money than the economy's trust could sustain, inflation exploded and confidence collapsed. Another timeless lesson. Money is only as strong as the faith behind it. But the Silk Road wasn't just the Mongols' strength, it was also their weakness. Along with silk and silver, the Silk Road carried something else: disease. In the 1340s, the Black Plague spread along these routes, devastating Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The network that enriched the Mongols also carried the plague that weakened their empires. Money talks. History speaks. Trade, like money, is never neutral. It can create wealth, but also transmit collapse. For the Mongols, as an empire whose legitimacy rested on guaranteeing the security and prosperity of trade, the plague was catastrophic. Merchants stopped traveling, caravans halted, markets withered. Without trade, the glue holding the empire together cracked. The Mongol Empire eventually fragmented. By the late 1300s, the great Khanate dynasties were at war with each other. But the idea Genghis Khan set in motion, that empires rise and fall with the power of trade routes, never disappeared. In fact, it became the template for global power in subsequent centuries. The Ottoman Empire controlled the Eastern Mediterranean and taxed European merchants seeking access to Asian goods. When these customs became unbearable, Europeans sought new routes, launching the Age of Discovery. Columbus sailed west, not for glory, but for trade. In this sense, Genghis Khan's empire didn't end. It globalized. The principles he used are still with us. Today's supply chains, the veins carrying oil, semiconductors, grain, and capital worldwide, are modern Silk Roads. Like 13th century merchants, companies, and governments want security more than low taxes. That's why choke points like the Strait of Malacca or the Suez Canal are fiercely protected. When pirates threaten trade, navies respond as Mongol horsemen once did. When a global pandemic hit in 2020, supply chains froze just as the Black Plague once froze caravans. The rhyme is clear. Trade creates wealth, but fragility can destroy it. Genghis Khan understood that money is trust. He protected merchants, guaranteed contracts, and enforced rules with ruthless consistency. Today, central banks play the same role. When financial markets wobble, governments rush to convince investors the system is secure. Bailouts change the cavalry, but the logic is the same. Without trust, flow stops and empires collapse. What can we learn from this history? First, trade is power. Genghis Khan conquered with horses, but ruled with caravans. Control of the Silk Road gave him leverage no sword could provide. Second, wealth is fragile. The roads that carried silk and silver also carried plague. In our world, the supply chains that bring prosperity can also transmit crisis, whether pandemic, financial collapse, or geopolitical blockade. Third, true wealth is resilience. In the Mongol era, those who survived weren't the ones chasing easy profits, but those who adapted, diversified, and understood that once trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild. Don't confuse access with security. The global financial system, like the Silk Road, works perfectly when everything is stable. But when the chain breaks, when trust collapses, the illusion of security vanishes overnight. Financial education means asking the question, if the roads I trust suddenly stop, will I still stand? If inflation erodes my paper wealth, do I have assets that preserve value? If the system bends under pressure, do I understand how to get outside its traps? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And the rhyme of Genghis Khan and the Silk Road is clear. Empires are built not just by conquest, but by the trade and money lines that connect the world. Break these lines. Even the mightiest empire falls. Understand them, and you see how power really works. Then and now. Money doesn't talk. History speaks. Old money.